Hunting or Bust, The Journey Onward by Master Atlan, Chapter 24, The Lineage That Binds. Do you see it? You see it, right? Naruto repeatedly stated like an insane man as he waved his paper in front of his teammates' faces. His eyes might as well have been bouncing around in his head as he palmed the paper. 72! I got a 72 on the last test. Can you believe it? I'm smart. Tenten was sitting back against the wall with the pillow behind her and a magazine in her hands. She put it down to give her leader an encouraging smile. Yeah, Naruto, we see your test. We all saw it. We all saw it when you were waving it around like a maniac at lunch, too. She closed the magazine on the page she left off and sat up in her bed. We're very proud that you've improved your score, but you've got to calm down. Any more boasting and people will start thinking you're crazy. Most people probably already do, Kiba noted as he lowered the comic book and ridiculed his celebrating partner. Plus, 72 really isn't much to celebrate over, Naruto. You might want to try getting a better score before blowing your mind over something like this. Kiba cheating was ineffective in ruining the whiskered boy's joyful behavior as he dashed up next to the bed and got up in the brunette's face. 77! You got a 77 and I got a 72. I'm closing in on you, Naruto sneered. Soon you shall be the dumbest of the group and I shall be only slightly less dumb. Kiba groaned and pushed Naruto's face away. Yeah, okay, keep telling yourself that. You know it was your lucky break, right? Luck had nothing to do with it. Naruto proudly thumbed his chest. This was Smart's and Velvet's studying method. I told you guys about Velvet, right? How I know an upperclassman, right? Tenten tiredly nodded. Yes, Naruto, you told us, and you made Ruby and John back you up on it too. Kiba palmed his face. Oh my god, can you go back to being dumb? You were more tolerable then. Ugh, and Kiba groaned before looking across the room at the only person they knew that had been able to survive and excited Naruto for extended periods of time. Sasuke, you gonna chime in and stop this madness before I'm forced to punch his teeth in? Because at this point, I'm fine with either option. The three other students looked over at their silent friend as he was looking down at his notebook with a contemplative stare. Tenten saw the serious concentration on Sasuke's face and wondered what her partner was thinking. She inquired, Sasuke, you okay? He looked up. Huh? He saw that they were all looking at him sitting there in silence and he sat up in response. Sorry guys, I wasn't paying attention. Kiba scoffed. We noticed. What's got you all absent-minded? Sasuke showed them the stuff he had written down on his notebook. It's the writing assignment Professor Goodwitch gave us today. Nope. No. In an instant, Naruto dove into his bed to cover his face and ears. Kiba went back to hiding behind his comic, and Tenten went to desperately reading her magazine to avoid the conversation as her eyes started around too fast to actually read. The Uchiha looked between all of them blankly and lowered his notebook tensely. What's wrong with all of you? Naruto lifted his head out of his pillow and glared at his best friend. What's wrong with you? We just got that essay today. Can't we just have a day before someone brings it back up and it starts bearing down on us? To be honest, I agree with him. Sasuke looked over to see Tenten look up from her magazine with a little bit of apprehension. She shrugged. I know it sounds pretty lazy, but we did just get that essay today. It's good to stay on top of these things, but we can slow down and take our time with them if we plan ahead. Plus, she gave us like 2 weeks to do it, Kiba added. That freaking guarantees the paper is going to be hard as hell, and she definitely doesn't expect anyone to already start working on it the first day. Or are you one of those kids that always finishes their projects the first day they got them? Sasuke looked down at his notes and grumbled while scratching his head. They made sense about not wanting to do this project right away. The class was assigned to fill up a minimum of 3 pages for an informative essay about a subject. He really did want to withhold from doing the paper so soon, but there was one problem with that. The subject they were writing about were different for everyone. Off of a long list to choose to write about, you needed to go up to Professor Goodwitch and choose an idea. His first choice, the easiest one for him to write about, was taken, and so were his backups, so he picked one that sounded interesting. Dust in modern society, but there was a big problem with the topic he chose. He didn't know a lot about the use of dust in modern society. He bought the rounds for his shotgun in bulk, so did Kiba for his tonfa. Naruto's arrows were mechanical, and Tenten didn't use dust at all. He had no one on his side to help him think this through, and that was enough for him to believe he dropped the ball on this assignment already. Ugh, he rubbed his eyes tiredly as he visualized how many books and reports he would need to shuffle through before getting the appropriate amount of information he needed for the paper, and it was a lot. But then an easier, faster, and arguably more effective answer popped into his head. He closed his notebook and shuffled out of the bed before walking out the door. I'll be back in a sec. His teammates watched him leave before Kiba shook his head and went back to his comic. That dude needs to relax. I doubt he could. Naruto shook his head. Sasuke tries to hide it from everyone else, but he's a total nerd. It's a real shame. And Tenten sarcastically giggled at her leader's ignorance to his own faults. Yep, Sasuke's a nerd, and you two are dorks. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Naruto waved his hand defensively. I think you need to check your facts, Tenten. We are not dorks. Kiba suddenly cackled drew their attention as he held his side with laughter. He's got a pet rock to help him fight crime. Oh, let me see, let me see. Naruto ran to the side and looked at the comics with his partner before snorting and gasping for air. That's the best. Yep, totally not dorks. Hunting. Knock, knock, knock. I'm coming. The door swung open and a melancholic Ruby looked up to see the black-haired swordsman of Team Noctic standing outside patiently. The younger student seemed to perk up with joy and hoped that something fun might happen. She threw her arms up in delight. Sasuke! Hey, Ruby! The boy gave a reserved wave and felt confused as to why she seemed so excited that night. He just blamed it on her natural high energy and sugar rush. I was just... Hold on. She looked back into her room. Guys, Sasuke's here. Not even a moment later did Yang appear by her sister and looked at the Chica like he was some shiny ray of hope. The blonde seemed so giddy to see him again. Awesome! We're so glad you're here. They really were sisters. Before he could ask what was wrong, Ruby looked up at him expectantly. Sasuke, did something happen that we can help with? Yang nodded. Yeah, like for example, did you make another enemy out of a sociopath and need our help to bring him down? Because if you did, then we are totally game for that. Right now. Immediately, in fact. Running away won't make it disappear. Sasuke blinked in confusion before shaking his head. No, still just the one. He remembered what he needed to do and tried to focus on that. Actually, I came over because I wanted to ask Weiss for something. The two sisters blinked and looked between each other with bewilderment before a pair of high-heeled boots started knocking against the floor. Ruby and Yang stepped aside as Weiss walked up to the door and looked Sasuke over for a moment before crossing her arms and pointedly asking, What do you want? Sasuke got straight to the point. Have you looked over anything about your essay subject yet? Oh no! And Yang grumbled out and she and Ruby seemed to fall into despair. They shook their heads. No, not you two. It's spreading. Ruby held her head in panic. It's spreading. Weiss waved them off. Ignore them. Yes, I've been considering my research topic lately, and I just recently proposed to the rest of my team that we should seriously consider how we are going to complete them quickly and effectively. Sorry, Weiss, but I can't talk about this with you. Sasuke and Weiss looked back into the room to see Ruby atop her bed and covering her ears with her pillow. My ears have been blocked by my pillow, and I can't get them off. Oh no, the humanity. La 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 la. Me too, Yang added from her bed as she placed her headphones over her ears and started fiddling with her scroll. My music is up all the way and I can't hear anything. Falling towards the sky, waiting for my ride. Yang flinched in pain as the bass rang out so loud that the duo could hear it all the way from the door, but still, the brawler kept her headphones on to avoid any discussion about the essay. Sasuke and Weiss finally looked down from Yang's bed and spared a look to the girl reading her book in solitude. Blake spared them a look in return, blinked once before flipping her page and resuming where she left off. Weiss turned back to the Noctics member and nodded. Anyways, I was planning out to work on my essay. What do you care? Well, my topic for the essay was the use of dust in today's society. Weiss gave an uncaring but affirmative hum. Well, that's a very good subject and there's a lot to choose from. Sounds like you got a lucky draw. Yeah, except I don't really know a lot about it or the books that would help me the best. Weiss's indifferent demeanor switched for a bemused one as she looked at him strangely. She raised an eyebrow and questioned, Don't know a lot? What do you mean? Who doesn't know dust helps us every day? What did you live under a rock? I lived a rather simple life, Sasuke answered before shaking his head. Doesn't matter. I need help and I was just thinking who better to ask than an expert. So, would you be willing to help me? Wait, what? Ruby stopped singing to herself and pulled the pillow over her head when she heard Sasuke's suggestion. Even Blake stopped reading her book and lowered it enough to peek over the top and watch what was happening with her full attention. Yang was still blasting music in her ears and had no idea what was going on. Weiss blinked in confusion and shock before staring at him with pure bewilderment. She raised her brow. You want my help? Sasuke nodded. Well, you seem like the most knowledgeable individual on the subject. I couldn't think of anyone more gifted in the field of dust than you. The smugness couldn't be contained as Weiss smiled and flicked her side ponytail before crossing her arms proudly. Well, you can obviously see a talented and gifted individual when you notice one. Knowing my expertise and not bad-mouthing it is always a good way to ask for a favor. Some people could learn from that. Rue mumbled sadly and Blake rolled her eyes. Of course she'd bring up the first time they all met. When Weiss's pride was filled and her haughtiness was in full bloom, nothing was safe from her scorn. The ivory-haired hair's face suddenly twisted into an accurately look that startled Sasuke. Although I'm honestly surprised you aren't well versed in the subject of dust, considering you've been so well acquainted with it for some time now. Ruby leaned over her bed and tried to whisper into Blake. I think she's talking about the thing where he and Naruto stole dust for that Will Sky and... Weiss interrupted over her shoulder. Shut up! And Sasuke looked to the side with guilt for the fact he and his friend committed not too long ago. He solemnly noted, I suppose it would have been too easy expecting you to forgive us for that, huh? Weiss faced back towards him and let her eyes fall for a moment. She stood up straight, stepped out of her more easy and superior posture as she kept her arms folded. Well, I can appreciate that you told us and helped catch the scoundrel that was to blame for it, and considering you were forced to do it and that my family's belongings have now been returned to us, I suppose I can also forgive you for your criminal behavior, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't still peeved every now and then remembering it. Sasuke nodded. I understand, and I'm sorry for that, and if you don't want to help me, then I'm okay with that. I just thought I could take the chance and ask you, and if you want something in return, then I would owe you, or I could help you in something, or... Sasuke awkwardly trailed off for a bit before realizing that he was probably wasting his time. He gave a silent sigh before nodding his head and walking away from the door. Sorry for bothering you. Wait! Sasuke turned back around and saw Weiss standing there with her eyes closed in meditation. After a moment, they opened again as she looked over towards him. All right, I'll assist you with your essay. A relieved smile came over his face as she stood back in her usual posture. Meet me in the library tomorrow, after classes, and I'll help you with what you need. Sasuke asked, wait, tomorrow? You asked me for my help. We do it on my schedule, and I said tomorrow. Any problems with that? He shook his head. Good. See you tomorrow in the library. She shut the door before he could say anything else and walked back over to her bed. She stopped right in front of it when she felt some eyes watching her move. Ruby was looking over her bed with gleeful joy as Blake still watched with her stoic gaze. The Harris question, what are you looking at? Oh, Weiss, that was so nice of you. Ruby cheered with delight and her partner didn't remain cold to the request. I knew you weren't an ice queen with a solid chunk of ice for a heart. There you go, using that name again. I'm not an ice queen. Weiss then looked mortified and covered her heart. And what do you mean, a chunk of ice? It's just rather surprising to see you helping someone like that, Blake answered before quietly muttering. And him, of all people. Huh. Weiss hummed and placed a hand on her hip. Well, as the kind and helpful person I am, it's just a natural disposition to assist those that need help. Don't you worry about the dark. I will light up the night with the love in my heart. The other girls all looked up to see their blonde teammates still blasting her music directly into her ears to avoid the essay conversation. Weiss sighed and walked up to the bedside before poking the brawler's leg. Yang looked down at her. We finished talking, Yang. You can take the headphones off. What? They all flinched when Yang yelled at the top of her lungs. Weiss's eyes twitched and trembled a little before miming for her to remove her headphones. The busty girl followed her instructions and removed them from over her ears. Better. What? The other girls just palmed their faces tiredly. Now they had to deal with this. Hunting. Now, using my prior knowledge of the most useful books and encyclopedias available, as well as my professional opinion on what information they gathered is most accurate and helpful for the purpose of the essay, I have gathered together some text that will assist with your writing. Thud. The table trembled, and Sasuke swore he felt his chair bounce from the immense pile of papers and books placed in front of him. Weiss dusted her hands off and placed them on her hips proudly. You can start thanking me now if you want. Sasuke sat up in his seat so he could look over the pile in front of him with absolute disbelief. He fell back in his chair with mouth agape in shock and awe before mechanically turning to look up at the pale-haired girl. She furrowed her eyes. What? Don't you give me that look. You asked for my help and this is it. This is me helping you. You can show some thanks for that. But this is a lot more than I thought, Sasuke muttered. I thought you'd help me pick out a book and that was it. Wouldn't something like... He picked one off the pile. The Complete History of the Shinidust Company for Dummies and Other Inadequate Individuals be enough to cover it? Please, that book doesn't even scratch half of the history of my family's company. Plus, you should be focusing on the broader scope of what Dust accomplishes in society and not just what an energy company does with it, even one as successful as ours. Weiss scoffed and knocked the book out of his hand before pointing at his face. You said I was the expert. Well, take the expert's advice and start flipping through the pages. Sasuke was starting to regret using that term in particular to assuage the Harris to help. He pulled one book out in particular and flipped it open to a random page. He stared at it for a moment before looking up at her quizzically. Didn't Goodwitch say we need a minimum of one book reference for the essay? Can't I pick a book and just use the internet for the rest of it? This is the chance for you to gain actual knowledge. Don't waste it. Why seemed overly excited about the idea of working hard and organizing effort like this. She took out her white notebook and sat across the table as she opened it up and started writing things down. Let's get to work. What was she working on? Wasn't this to help him with his paper? The question plagued Sasuke's thoughts for a second before he just sighed and went back to work. There was a lot he needed to look through, apparently. The swordsman and the Harris sat in silence as they both looked through books and continued to write down notes. The two students sat in incompatible silence for several minutes as they worked away on their respective pieces. They're not doing anything. Is this supposed to be this boring? No. Then what's wrong? It's these two that's doing it. The group of 5 snoops were spying on the odd duo, hoping to see something special when the news that the ebony-haired boy and the ivory-haired girl would be working together reached them. But a few minutes into it, and all that had happened was Weiss picked books, they talked, and now silent working. This was not the exciting reconnaissance mission they had hoped for. Yang sighed and rubbed her bridge with disappointment. Leave it to Weiss to take a study date and actually use it for work and study. How boring can you be? Ruby looked up from behind the bookshelves they were spying from and looked at her sister quizzically. Well, what are you supposed to do if you aren't studying on a study date? I don't know either. Yang gave her sister a smile. And that's what makes you so innocently cute. Naruto looked at the brother in confusion as well. I don't know either. Yang gave him a small smile. And that's what makes you simple. Hey, shh. Tenten shushed her friends incessant talking during their investigation before looking back to critically inspect her partner. We're doing this in secret, guys. No noise. Stop talking. The 3 lowered their heads in shame as John furrowed his eyes. You know, when you guys told me Sasuke and Weiss were gonna hang out alone, I thought you meant they were going out on a date, like they were gonna go see a movie or go to dinner or something. But now we're just watching the one thing that's almost as boring as watching other people study. Ruby groaned. He's totally right. I want to go back to our room and relax. The peeved players probably released a new video and I'm gonna miss it. It'll be there when you get back. Yang pulled Ruby's hood over her head to put a halt on her complaining as she kept watching with hope that something exciting would happen. Something had to happen when 2 attractive teenagers got together away from their friends. She was holding out for something interesting. If I miss something juicy and can't hold it against Weiss, I'll be pissed. Tenten stared at the other girl pointedly. Hey, I don't know about you, but I'm here to make sure Sasuke acts properly. I have to make sure he can act like a proper gentleman when he's out with someone. Yang scoffed. Pfft. Proper gentleman? That just sounds boring. I want to see something fun. John grumbled beneath his breath enviously. Stupid study date, stupid essay, stupid Sasuke with his charming stupid face. He realized he was grumbling this beside 2 of Sasuke's teammates and quickly pedaled back. So sorry guys, I didn't mean that. I'm just sort of miffed is all. Naruto shrugged. Nah, you're not wrong. Sasuke has a stupid face. Tenten nudged his shoulder. What? It's true. Ruby rested her chin on the shelf and moaned. I'm hungry. She looked over at her fellow hyperactive spaz with hope. Naruto, did you bring any snacks or cookies? Naruto reached into his pack and pulled out a little bag with broken cookies in it. Way ahead of you. Yay! Yang whispered loudly. Ruby, shush! Her little sister flinched from the blonde's abrasive tone before she looked between all of them. Guys, this is a golden opportunity to catch our friends doing something embarrassing, and we can hold it over them forever. Do you really want to miss that? Ruby gave a hesitant shake of her head. I really don't want to get on Weiss's bad side anymore. She gets mad at me enough. Naruto threw some cookies in his mouth. I can screw with Sasuke any way I want. It's not that hard. John scratched his cheek. I'm really not sure I can risk making Weiss any madder with me than normal. She glares at me like crazy as it is. Tenten shook her head. I'm good. Yang sighed. Well, I do, so I'm not leaving until I see something funny, so get ready for the long haul, guys. She and the rest of them turned back to stare at their friends. We're going to be here as long as we need. Unfortunately, the moment they turned around, they were met with the sight of Sasuke turned around in his chair, staring in their direction, and Weiss propping her head against her hand while leaning on the table, glaring at them. Sasuke sent them a small wave while Weiss's eyes narrowed in contempt for their efforts to spy on them. Not knowing what to do, Ruby just waved back meekly. Hey, run! John, Tenten, Yang, Ruby, and Naruto all immediately jumped to their feet and tried to escape before they were caught. They stumbled and tripped over each other in a long, awkward attempt to run as the duo just sat there watching them fumble. After finally getting their footing back, they immediately sprinted down the floor to escape the library and all the stairs they had garnered. And Sasuke turned back in his seat after watching the strangest spectacle and shrugged. I wonder what that was about. Weiss rolled her eyes before droning derisively. Something stupid, no doubt. Something I'll have to deal with when I get back to our room. She went back to writing in her book while also contemplating ways to punish Yang and Ruby when she saw them again. This is an unfortunate byproduct of having someone as unyielding as Yang as a teammate. She's adamant to follow and get any material she can to use to tease us on a regular basis. Sasuke showed his empathy for the white-clad girl's plight. I'm sorry to hear that, but the sudden glower that crossed the hair's face shut his mouth instantaneously. The ivory girl sheathed in a mix of anger and regret before glaring at the boy across from her. Well, it certainly hasn't gotten any easier considering that your blockhead of a leader decided to. She grumbled a little and rubbed her eyes. Decided to film me performing that song. Oh, the Angel debacle? Sasuke wasn't 100% sure if it had a proper name considering he wasn't part of any tight social group before now, but he was certain this was what we called an inside joke. Ruby and Yang giggled between themselves thinking about it. John still tried to make the Snow Angel nickname work now that Weiss had literally appeared in front of them as an angel. Kiba attempted to chide her sometimes to get a reaction, but immediately shut up when she glared. Nora hummed the song with genuine and earnest appreciation for the music, making it very difficult for her to be angry at the energetic powerhouse. Naruto had it as his ringtone. Sasuke was not looking forward to the day when Weiss found out about that little tidbit. Weiss covered her face, mortified at the reality that her singing that song was probably going to haunt her for the remainder of her time at Beacon, and maybe her life if they stayed in contact after graduating. Sasuke seemed rather uncomfortable with Weiss's depressed disposition just a foot in front of him. He scratched the back of his head before trying to console her. Well, in my opinion. Weiss shot up. Don't. Nor Weiss glared at him vehemently as she nearly growled out. I've already heard it all. Every single last joke that could be made is one Yang already made. Did I fall from heaven? Am I a good angel or a bad angel? Did I? Weiss looked flustered and turned away from the boy for a moment before whispering beneath her breath. Did I stuff, or was it that dress? She then huffed and sat back in her seat and crossed her arms. So try as you might, there's nothing you can say that I haven't already heard. I thought that was a really beautiful song, and you have a nice voice. Weiss opened her eyes again and blinked before turning back to see Sasuke working on his paper again. She just sat there in stunned silence as her brain tried to comprehend the compliment. Well, that's something she hadn't heard yet. The hare sat there silently for a moment before sitting properly in her seat and getting back to work. The awkward silence between them persisted as they had nothing to break the tension. Only the sound of pencils scratching against paper continued. Weiss heard a gentle tune and looked up to see Sasuke subconsciously humming something while he worked. The Shinigami girl originally thought he was humming the tune of the song she sang and prepared to chew him out as well before realizing it was a completely different rhythm than she knew. She sat there listening to him quietly murmured the strange tune before speaking up. You're humming? Huh? Sasuke looked up at her before he realized what she said and sat up. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was doing that. I'll try to stop. Weiss insisted. What song was that? I don't recognize the cadence. It's nothing. It's just something I apparently hum when I don't realize it. Tendon said I'd do it too. It's... Sasuke's eyes seemed preoccupied with the book beside him and silently drawled. Just an old song my family used to sing. Weiss grew interested in what he was referring to and asked, You didn't strike me as coming from a musical family. I don't mean they sat around writing songs. It's just a nursery rhyme that was passed down in my family. My parents' used to sing it to them. He erased something on his paper. It helps lull people to sleep. Weiss hummed in return. I think I'd like to hear that. Sasuke gave a dry smile. Do you want to use your favor to get me to sing off key? Not at all, Weiss responded. My father says you should never waste a favor on something useless as personal intrigue. You'll never know what you can get out of a person later down the road. Sasuke chuckled nervously and tried to avoid how bleak that was to say to their own daughter. That's a nice piece of advice. It's the advice of a businessman, Weiss corrected, but I suppose it can hold some merit in certain situations. Sasuke was not looking forward to that certain situation. To be completely honest, for a while I believed I owed a debt of gratitude to you. Weiss looked up to see the confused look on the swordsman's face. For speaking to me about giving Ruby a chance on our first day. I appreciate your guidance, and despite some continued issues, I feel like she has become a much better leader that I can follow, so I owe you for talking some sense into me. And Sasuke seemed surprised that he had gotten in the good graces of the stern girl. Oh, well, you're well. But then I found out you had been stealing from my family's company for years, and then we went to help you to stop that madman, so I'm pretty sure we're even now. Shrewd, but fair. Sasuke placed his pencil down and looked over what he had written so far. There were bullet points down the entire page filled with sentences long excerpts about the use of dust and how it affects their everyday modern life. Now all he had to do was work out some rough edges and turn it all into paragraphs, and his work was done. Weiss's experience turned out to be very beneficial indeed. He looked up at the pile of books in front of him. Once he started actually digging into it, the pile wasn't nearly as bad or big as it looked. He looked over at the books and noticed one that seemed like it had an older cover and design than the others. He looked to see Weiss still focused on her paper, so he reached over and flipped it open. The swordsman decided to break the silence that settled between them as he turned the page. Do you know what your family did before they became involved in the energy propel market? Weiss gave a vague hum without looking up from her notebook. I was told my grandfather used to expand and purchase small businesses in an effort to create a large conglomerate that could specialize or deliver on any service or good needed. On the cusp of the war, he started investing in mining and transporting dust to the kingdoms for profit, helping Atlas develop the cross-continental transit, and exporting the prints to be developed in the other kingdoms just helped to push it all along. And what about before your grandfather? Weiss gave a small sigh. Don't bother asking about the unnecessary Weiss, and just focus on now and how that will affect our future. That's what my father told me when I was young. When I asked, the Harris mind wandered for a moment in thought. I looked up some of our history after he said that, but it wasn't anything of great importance. Some people's family history doesn't really get to begin until late down the road, while some begin far, far earlier than where they stand now. Sasuke's eyes paused for a moment, and as the pieces started coming together, he questioned, why didn't you pick this topic? These projects are for the purpose of expanding our knowledge and taking on topics some of us are not familiar with. I've learned about dust and its faculties for so much of my life that it would be just too easy and boring to waste my time writing about it. Weiss answered while still concentrating on the paper. So, I chose a topic that seemed more intriguing to me. You chose to write about the first hunters and the people that guarded the kingdoms first. Weiss looked up and saw Sasuke holding up the book he was reading from her side of the pile, The Hunter Origins. If he was angry or upset, he didn't show it as Sasuke merely droned on. I was wondering who took that topic first. Weiss sat back in her seat and sighed before almost looking apologetic. When you asked for my help yesterday, I thought you could benefit from working together on our papers. You needed help from my family's knowledge on the subject, and I could ask you about your family. Then I realized that. Weiss crossed her arms with chagrin and indignant expression on her face, that I would not appreciate if someone I didn't know very well sat across from me for an evening and hounded me about my family. So I decided to work on it on my own and give you the best points I could think of myself. Sasuke considered the Harris confession before he asked, but you're still interested in asking, aren't you? Her silence seemed like a pretty clear answer. His onyx eyes fixed into her light blues, and he nodded. You can ask if you want. He shrugged. It seems like you already know enough, so me filling in the blanks can't do much else. The white-haired girl hesitated for a moment before finally asking, are you really a Uchiha? Sasuke relaxed back in his seat and nodded. Yes, I'm a real Uchiha. I'm a descendant of one of the first families to ever take up the mantle of hunter for the kingdom of Rennet. Weiss shook her head in reserved disbelief. I thought that name seemed familiar when I first heard it, but I couldn't believe it. They were ancient. The names like Uchiha, Pengun, and Arcean that helped mold the foundation of hunters today were thought to have disappeared entirely. Either the name died out or the family member did. Ours was the latter, Sasuke informed him. After the war ended and Remnant came into a time of peace, the remaining members of the family that didn't die in the war scattered and traveled the globe, but they started dying out one by one before the name fell into obscurity and only a handful were left. But this is amazing. Weiss jumped out of her seat and seemed to beam with excitement and anticipation. I always wondered why someone who never tried to make a deep impression in others and never joined a training program was still so capable and skilled enough to hold off a champion like Pyranikos. But now I understand. You're the successor to one of the oldest and most extinguished hunter bloodlines in the world. Don't you see how astonishing this is? You could brand yourself as the rival of your heritage. The Uchiha were renowned for the abilities, the skills, their undying loyalty, and their willingness to do whatever the kingdoms asked of them to do back in the old days. Weiss's energy seemed to immediately die down as she looked down at the prodigal son with a disheartened expression. The girl seemed to realize the mood and spoke in a much softer tone. The Pengun family was most famous for their loyalty to protecting the people. The Arceans were famous for their hunting of Grimm. and the Uchiha were most famous for their execution of criminals in Faunus during the time when we were still separated. The worst part about inheriting a famous name, you couldn't do anything about the history it had already established. Back when the kingdoms were first forming and the Faunus were being kept out of the protection walls, some of them started attacking the borders. As such, the kingdoms needed to be guarded, and one family that had taken up the role of protectors, the Uchiha, volunteered to deter any sentient threat that endangered the growing serenity these new societies promised, and they followed through without any problems. Some would believe that they reveled in their accomplishments. That wasn't so that the Uchiha solely killed the Faunus during their campaign under the sigils of the kingdoms, but it couldn't be denied that if you were to pile the two groups of bodies together, there was a distinct difference in size between them. After the war ended and the royal family was no longer needed, they had separated and tried to find their place in a peaceful world, but some people did not forget what the family had done while they were protected by the duties of the consul when the remaining members were caught by the people. They had many years of persecution they carried out to pay for, and even after all this time, and the name Uchiha still held weight for what it used to be, some people expected him to be ruthless and cold. Most was hoping for him to become an assassin, his right-hand man, or even a successor to his practice in the future. People were wary around him. And Faunus didn't associate with him. They didn't talk to him. They didn't even want to look at him. When they realized who he is, they either look at him with condemnation or fright. That rabbit Faunus Naruto had become acquainted with had passed him by a few times in the hallway, and he swore she became paler with every step close to him before she was out of his sight. I don't tell the others on my family this, but sometimes when I open my locker, I find notes in there, threats, intimidations, from people that think I'm here to continue on the efforts of my ancestors. Sasuke gave a reserved sigh before shaking his head. Thanks for the thought, but the last thing I came here to do is revive the heritage my family is known for. Weiss crossed her legs and asked quizzically, "What would the rest of your family think if they found out you were being threatened like this?" Sasuke didn't respond. In fact, his face didn't change at all from the solid mask he had while talking to her about this subject. Weiss's eyes slowly widened in recognition as she understood his silence. She nearly whispered out, "My apologies. I had assumed that there were difficulties between you before you became a thief and came here. I didn't. It's fine." Sasuke reassured her. "I never mentioned it before, so I can't expect you to know it." Weiss seemed unusually quiet at the topic before asking, "How did it happen?" "A grim attack. We were surrounded by Grim, and we had no way to escape by ourselves. My brother kept me close in his arms because I was too young, and my parents told him to escape with me while he still could. He said that before he knew it, they were overwhelmed and were killed." She looked up to him as he simply talked about his parents' demise before a confused expression came over his face. "I was so young when it happened that I don't remember anything about them. When I think back to them, it's like a blurry picture. I know who they are and what they mean to me, but no matter how hard I try, I can't remember anything beyond a few key moments." "It's weird." A somber Weiss gave a small nod. "I'm sorry to hear that." Sasuke returned her gesture of consideration. "Thanks." He looked back down at the wood of the table as he continued. "I hummed this song my mom used to sing to us because it's one of the only things I can remember them by. That and my father's sword. My brother gave it to me so that I can always remember them and their bravery in their last moment." Weiss looked at the long gaze the boy had in his eyes and asked, "What about your brother? Where is he?" Sasuke stayed silent for a moment as he let her question sink in. He closed his eyes before shaking his head. "Somewhere else." He didn't wish to honor his family name. He didn't appear to be pining after the recognition of his siblings. He wished to honor his parents purely for the reason of his fondness for them, and he hummed poorly just for sentimental reasons. Weiss would have to be a blind fool to not see the irony in sitting across from this boy at the moment. The proud girl crossed her arms in the heavy silence between them before finally stating sardonically, "You know." He looked up at her as she sadly looked off to the side. "If it makes you feel any better, you probably don't get nearly as many threats as I do in the mail." It took a second for Sasuke to remember the girl's background and the effect it would have on someone his age growing up in it. These last few months received the occasional threat felt jarring at times. He couldn't imagine how receiving that kind of anger from so many people in the public eyes must feel. Overwhelming, without doubt. "Thank you, Weiss." The white-clad girl scoffed. "What in the world could you possibly be thanking me for?" In her mind, all she had done was make him relieve some obsolete, uncomfortable memories. "For helping me with my paper, and for listening to me ramble on." A faint smile came over his face. "I know it was probably just a waste of your time, but it was relieving to get some of this off my chest." The girl turned her nose up impatiently. "If you were wasting my time, then I would have told you as such." She turned to face him again. "At least you heeded my advice and did something productive with your time." He nodded. "Right."
Thank you. I may actually be able to finish this paper by tomorrow. You're welcome. Weiss was silent for a moment before she looked aside and continued. And if you ever need some help with something else you are working on, you are free to come to me for assistance. You've proven that you can actually follow my rules better than my partner, so I'm willing to help you when you need it. Another more noticeable smile came over Sasuke's face. I might take you up on that offer sometime. That's good. Always strive for the best. Why suddenly felt relieved that Yang had left earlier before this little study session turned personal. Somehow that woman would read into this and try to make something embarrassing about it. She did not need that right now. Hunting. Sasuke swiped his scroll over the log and walked back into his room. I'm back. Do you want to give up now, loser? Please, I'm just getting started, wimp. After his long tutoring session with Weiss, Sasuke was greeted with the salt of sweat to his nose and yelling to his ears. He watched his Kiba and Naruto turn into blurs as they did push up beside each other while yelling out loudly. He walked in a little and raised an eyebrow. What's going on here? Naruto answered from the floor. Hey Sasuke, I'm teaching Kiba who's the best around here in a match to see who can do the most push-ups. Kiba yelled out. He said he could do way more than me, and I felt bad letting his delusions take him over like that, so I decided to smack a little reality into him and show him I'm the best. Sasuke watched skeptically as the two hotheads continued their little match of strength and will. He crossed his arms and asked, Who's winning? Naruto panted. Don't know, not keeping track. Kiba yelled through his breathing. Tenten was keeping track. The swordsman looked over to see his partner lazily lying over her bed and surfing on her scroll. She looked up from it to send him a cheeky smile before going back to playing. They were so absorbed in their competition they didn't even notice. Tenten, what's the count? Yeah, who's the best so far? It's close. She droned, eliciting a chuckle from Sasuke. You guys are doing great. Damn straight. Hey Naruto, you can quit now if you want. I won't blame you. That sounds like the cry of a man who knows he's about to fail. Hey, I was just being nice. When I win and you're crying in the corner, just know I gave you an out. Sorry, but I was never gonna give you an out. Best is best. Well, we can at least agree on that. I can hear you breathing heavy. What was that? I can't hear anything over your panting. Panting? What panting? I haven't even broken sweat. Then where's that stench coming from? You're smelling yourself, obviously. I can keep going on one hand. Hey, me too. Don't copy me. I'm not copying you. This is exactly a new achievement, you idiot. I see you're slowing down. Dude, I'm ready to go until you... Sasuke stepped over and kicked both of their hands out from beneath them, making them unceremoniously plant their heads in the ground. The blonde and brunette stayed silent there for a moment before craning their heads back and sending Uchiha a death glare until they've sent as any they sent before. He took it in stride and shrugged. I had to put an end to it. You guys might be cool with it, but I doubt we want to spend all night smelling your nasty sweat and hearing you both ridicule each other. The partners laid there for a moment before looking at each other. Kiba spoke. Wanna stop? Naruto nodded. Yeah, actually starting to feel kinda tired. Kiba chuckled. Hey, me too. The two boys laughed and got up before diving into their respective beds to relax. Sasuke decided to fall back in his own bed as well and opened up his notebook to look over everything he had written today. He was definitely set for finishing up his essay at his own pace. So, how was your session with Weiss? He looked over to his partner as she had a bit of a suggestive smile and eager tone to hear what he had to say. The black-haired boy deadpanned. You don't know. Looks like you were expecting something when you and the others were watching us earlier. A nervous smile came over Tenten's face before Naruto groaned. Ugh, I know she's all smart and stuff, but the pile of books was huge. You could fill a library with that much material. Sasuke rolled his eyes at the hyperbole. It wasn't nearly as bad as it looked. Really, because it looked pretty bad. Kiba scoffed as he had lounged back on his pillow. I knew she was an overachiever. Something about the way she's always going about above and beyond to do homework just spelled it out. I'm usually right about these things. You sound confident when you said she couldn't be a huntress in heels and a skirt, remember? But I'm pretty sure she proved you wrong in our first class when she blew the Bortusks so easily. And Kiba suddenly felt like he had his foot in his mouth as he gave a reluctant tilt of his head. Yeah, okay, I was wrong about that. She's good, but I had never seen anyone fight in frilly dress before, so I had my doubts. Apparently, it's a combat skirt. The three other members of the team looked up at their leader's questioningly on how he had corrected them so quickly. He shrugged. What? Ruby told me. Well, there you go. She's wearing something specially designed for fighting. Tenten joked to the dude boy. How about that, Kiba? You keep talking about other people and you'll get left behind before you know it. I bet it would suck to drop out after coming this far. Oh, like hell, I'm gonna get dropped, Kiba said in protest as his teammates laughed at pushing his buttons. The wild-looking boy huffed and leaned back into his pillow as a comfortable silence fell over the four of them. What would you guys do if this whole thing didn't pan out? Then the others looked up at Kiba as he questioned, what do you mean? I mean, if Beacon didn't work out and you had to get another job, he shrugged. Or like after you're retired from being a hunter and try getting another job. Or I don't know, it's up to you, but would you want to do anything else? Naruto sat up in his bed. Well, what would you do if you couldn't be a huntsman? Kiba scoffed. Oh, that's easy. I'd help my family's animal shelter. Naruto chuckled. Your family has an animal shelter? What? I never told you? An excited smile came over his face as the Tonfa user remembered his home and the animals they took care of. My family started a shelter years ago to take in animals and pets that didn't have homes. We have dogs, cats, hamsters, rabbits, ferrets, turtles, snakes, horses. Basically, any animal we found that didn't have a home, we took it in and cared for it. And some of them sound like they shouldn't get along. If they couldn't get along, they were put away in different places. We weren't going to risk the snakes getting put alongside the little critters, but the others got along really well. Kiba laughed and nodded. Yeah, if I retire or get kicked out of here, I'm going to work in the shelter. Ah, that's sweet. Tedinkud and Kiba grumbled beneath his breath before she looked up thoughtfully. She nodded. I'd probably take up the blacksmith business from my dad, build weapons and help others to construct their weapons too. I mean, I'm not all that great creating the more complex stuff because I screw up with gunpowder and dust, but I can definitely help others with my skills. Naruto laughed. Yeah, and you can always sell the stuff you make from your semblance if you need extra cash. I told you I can't do that. Tedin held out her hand and an aura formed into a small knife with a ring she let dangle on her fingers. I can only create stuff with my steel that lasts for a few minutes at best. That's why I always hide it before to make you guys think I have all these weapons on me. I can't sell it to people like that. They don't know that. A cheeky grin came over Naruto's whiskered face as he chuckled like a hyena. Just sell some of your weapons to them for some quick cash, run away, and your weapons disappear. Free money. Tenzin shook her head but couldn't help laughing at Naruto's little money scheme. She looked at him expectantly. Okay, Naruto, what would you do for a job instead? Naruto cupped his chin in thought and considered his alternative lifestyle besides huntsman. A small smile came over him before nodding. I'd want to build stuff, like houses or keep up the defenses and walls around the kingdom. Kiba seemed genuinely surprised by that answer. You want to go in construction? Yeah, building stuff and making things is fun, is super fun. Naruto responded eagerly. Just moving stuff around the room was fun a few weeks back, seeing what goes where best, moving it around for the most part, getting rid of those things we didn't need. Tedin glared pointedly. Like our desks. I definitely like to do that if I'm kicked out of or retire. And the look of joyous realization came over him as he continued. Oh, or cooking. I'd like to do more with my cooking if I could. Shock and surprise came over Kiba and Tenten as they stared at the bandana wearing boy in disbelief. Kiba's jaw went agape. Oh, wait, you can cook? Yeah, I can cook. Pretty well too, in my opinion. The blonde answered matter-of-factly. My mom taught me when I was growing up, and it stuck pretty well. They remained slack-jawed before they looked over at Sasuke for confirmation, and he nodded. He cooked every now and then when we were worked together. It was surprisingly tasty. Nothing surprising about it. A look of enthusiasm and anticipation came over Tenten's face as she sat up in her bed and smiled. How have we not heard about this? I want to eat something you cooked. I've never really gotten a chance, Naruto answered bashfully with a small smile. All our meals are prepared for us here, so there's never really been a need for me to make anything. Kiba asked sarcastically. Did anything you cooked taste good, or was it just lucky that Sasuke had a decent meal? Pride filled the leader's chest, and he announced, Hey, there are 3 things you can be certain about working with Naruto Uzumaki. I'm the leader of Noctix, I'm a moron, and I'm a damn good cook. One of those things isn't something to be proud about, dumbass. A small chuckle escaped Sasuke's lips, listening to his teammates' banter before it suddenly went silent. He looked up to see all 3 of them looking at him patiently. He realized they were waiting for him to answer next, and he closed his notebook. I don't know. Come on, Sasuke, what would you do if you had to get another job? The ribbon-haired teen racked his brain trying to think about what he would want to do if he had walked away from a Huntsman program, but no matter what he thought about, nothing immediately came to mind. He gave a hesitant shake of his head and relaxed his shoulders. I can think about what I'd want to do. Really? Tedin asked curiously. You're really good at a bunch of different stuff, so I think you can try out for a lot of different jobs if you want. Maybe, but I can't think about being anything other than a huntsman. Kiba yawned and fell back in his bed. Probably for the best. This was all just imaginary anyway. We're gonna be huntsmen and huntresses. That's all that matters. Totally. The others put the topic to rest and went back to entertaining themselves with their comics and scrolls. As Sasuke sat there silently, he thought about it. He thought about what it meant not having any other job in initiative or backup plan for the future. One of the reasons he came to Beacon and stayed after Wilsk was gone was because he wanted to prove something, either to the people or to himself, that the dark history of the Uchiha didn't need to stay dark and hovering over him for the rest of his life, and that he could move past it, that he didn't need to follow in their steps, but he couldn't ignore the hypocrisy that entitled as well. How could he say he was moving past the history of the Uchiha when he couldn't even imagine himself being anything other than a hunter? End of chapter 24.